Mortgage College of Education, will be with us with their seminar, which is titled as Learning Trajectories as Disruptors of Early Math. We request you to mute yourselves during the speech, and if you have any questions during the speech, you can reach us via the chat box. This session will be recorded, and we wish you that you will have an efficient seminar. Now, Professor Dr. Doughlas Clements and Julie Sarama will move on with their speech.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we're honored to be here, everyone. I hope you'll tell us if the sound and video, if there's any problems, and we'll try to slow down or something.
Yeah, also we both talk pretty fast. So we'll try to slow down just a little bit because we understand that our English can be fast. But we'll try to slow down. But today we're going to be talking about learning trajectories as disruptors of early math, meaning that we're really trying with our work to change what is normally done in early childhood education in mathematics.
And I'm just moving this over so we can see the people.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Just take a moment to move the windows around. Every time you share, Zoom moves your windows around. Let's start with this. Why is early math so important? Well, in a large-scale study of tens and thousands of kids in multiple studies, actually, so he combined them, Greg Duncan and his colleagues found that predictors of later school success were surprising. That is, they looked at reading, which is here, and every one of these dots represents a study and many children, and that predicted later school success. But look at attentional skills, internalizing and externalizing problems, and social skills really crossed the zero line, so they weren't very predictive. It doesn't mean they're not important. It means early childhood teachers do enough to build those competencies in kids and those affective components that they don't predict later school success because the kids are doing well. Early mathematics was the biggest predictor of later school success in all topics. In fact, early mathematics predicts, mostly in the US, these studies were, predicts high school graduation and college entry better than almost any other factor. So it's important for that reason. It's also important because children have amazing math potential. If given the opportunity to learn, they can learn an amazing, broad, complex, and sophisticated mathematics. What's this video we're going to see?
I don't know. I think this was we switched it. We did the boys.
Oh, yeah. So this is not a video. These are pictures. But these are boys who have been through Julie and my building blocks curriculum. And they pulled this puzzle off a shelf after a year of doing math with us. And it's really interesting what they did. Corey puts 4 triangles together to make a square, and he drops those in the puzzle. Then he does 4 more triangular prisms, really, triangular blocks in a square, and builds that into the puzzle. And then the other boys come along and see what he's doing, but they don't notice that Corey is making a new shape, a unit of units, by putting those triangles together into a square prism or block. So his friends want to help, and one boy sees the square, but he builds the wrong square. He only puts 2 triangles together, and it doesn't fit. So they have a long conversation, and they finally finish the puzzle. Whereupon Corey shows an adult who says, "How many triangles did you use?" And Corey counts 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 24. But the teacher says, 24 what? And he says, triangles. Then she asks, because she saw his solution strategy, how many squares do you have? And this is what's really fascinating to Julie and me, because Corey curls up a little finger, leaving only 4 fingers down, counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what's amazing to us is not just that Corey could count to 24 or 6. It's not just that he could solve the puzzle. He was making units of units. What do I mean by that? He could see the triangles of separate shapes or see them going together to make a square at the same time. He could count them individual as triangles and count them as a group. That kind of thinking leads to place value understandings,
Right.
and is an important foundation of later thinking.
So one of our key adaptations and our approach is stopping the idea that we teach to a target. In most educational systems, we have an idea that if we have a standard or a goal for children that is even an end of the year goal. So all children in their first year of education should learn how to count 20 objects with meaning. That's a good goal. But what happens in educational settings too much of the time is that teachers think, okay, well then I'm going to teach them to count 20 objects. And we start with 20 objects. The difference in a learning trajectories approach is we start with the level of children's thinking. We don't break it down. We don't start with, okay, we're going to count 20 objects, so we're going to put 20 objects out, and I'm going to model how to do it, and then I'm going to ask a child to do it, and we're going to keep doing that.
Or I'm going to break down by saying I'll just recite to 20 a million times.
Right,
and
until
then,
they get that part. And
yeah.
now we're going to have 20 objects, and they're going to be in a line, and I'm going to hold their hand and make them do it that way. Instead, we start with the child's level of thinking, seeing what children know and building that up. And so we're building on what children come to school with, which is so important. And we know if we meet children where they are developmentally and then slowly build them up to that level, that they're going to be way better off, and they're actually going to learn that rather than sort of just repeating what we want them to repeat. They're really going to understand and be able to take that knowledge higher. So learning trajectories is indeed how we teach teachers to start where they are. And that's what are learning trajectories. So the learning trajectories are of children, meaning they're representations and thinking that develop naturally in children, with activities or things that teachers can do or caregivers can do to help build their learning based on child's development. Therefore, they're always within the developmental capacities of children. They're the natural building blocks to the next level. And they're also the math building blocks of school success. So it fits into our hierarchical understanding of math. There are 3 parts of a learning trajectory. First is the goal, which we talked about. The second is a developmental progression. What are the steps of development that help children achieve that goal? And the last part are, what are the teaching practices? What do we put in our environment? What kind of interactions do we have? What questions do we have with children? What discussions do we have? What are the activities that we're going to do with children to make sure that they move along that developmental progression?
Because there's been plenty of research on mathematics that has helped us build up objectives, curriculum, standards. People in different countries call them different things. Sometimes it's the curriculum, but it's the goal. There's been work on kids' learning that has helped build some assessments. And there's been work on instructional tasks that has helped us build some written curriculum and teaching ideas. But Julie and I think only a scientific approach to learning trajectories weaves these 3 areas of research together so that our goals or standards, our curriculum and teaching, and our assessments all come from this common research base.
So what are the goals? Well, the goals, I gave an example of a goal, which was having children count with meaning up to 20 objects. That could be a curricular goal. But we also want to consider its conceptual understanding. Yes, there's fluency. Children should be good at counting. But we really want them to understand counting and not just follow along. We want strategic competence. So just the kind of thing of knowing how to keep track of objects when I'm counting, or strategies in arithmetic. Those are very important for us.
So you mean as you use counting to solve a problem?
Exactly, exactly. When does counting come into play to help me solve other problems? And also adaptive reasoning, the idea that children are able to explain what they're thinking, justify what they're thinking. And then finally, a big goal for us has to include a productive disposition towards math. And the nice thing about learning trajectories is they help children see themselves as able and capable of math, because we are indeed meeting them where they are developmentally. So the way we teach teachers about learning trajectories is with a website called learningtrajectories.org. I mean, we have books and things like that that are available as well, but the learningtrajectories.org website indeed kind of contains much of the information. So we're going to use that as a way to talk about this, because anybody can go to that website later and see the same types of things. So what's on there? Well, first of all, the first thing I hope you notice is that math is so much more than what's typically taught to young children. Most of the time, we go with the easy idea that math for young children stops at counting. It begins at counting and it stops at counting. Maybe we spend a little bit of time with children learning some basic shapes, but we don't do much beyond that. But we know that children are capable in engaging in a wide variety of mathematics. And so if you go there, you can see all the different kinds of math that we're working with, and that we can see children's development through all those different areas. Now for today's talk, we can't obviously go through all those levels. We're just going to focus on a couple. We're going to focus on counting. I thought subitizing as well. Actually,
I think we changed our mind on that one.
Subitizing and composition of shapes. So start with subitizing.
So tell me quickly, don't tell me, you could just think about it. But quickly, what do you see? So think what you saw when you see this picture. Think about that and hold that, because what we're going to do is move through the three parts of a learning trajectory that involve that kind of competence. That is, when you saw that tree, those three trees, I doubt you counted the trees,
yes,
but I bet you thought you saw three trees. So the goal for subitizing is that children quickly recognize, well, first recognize and then subitize, or quickly recognize, the number in a group without counting. So when I show you that, most of you could see that there were 5 dots, even though it came quickly. So when we say number recognition, we do want to make sure that we don't miscommunicate, that some people think, oh, number recognition, I teach that. See, I show them this 5 and they have to say 5. That's an important skill, but it's a language arts skill. We don't mean that. We mean actually look at the competence to see a group of objects and know the number in that group. Okay? And so if we move to the second part of the learning trajectory, the typical path children follow in moving from one level to the thinking another, the broad path, is we first learn the approximate number system. That comes almost pretty well at birth. Then kids can recognize numbers, but not necessarily quickly. And then they do perceptual subitizing. That's quick, but it's a small number. And then conceptual, which lifts subitizing up to not be just for early childhood, preschool, but also be through the early primary grades up to second or third grade, 7 or 8 years of age at least.
And our colleagues in Europe, in fact, have really taken conceptual subitizing and made it the foundation of instruction for arithmetic. They see it as the foundation. So we're going to show you a little video about what do we mean about approximate number system. It's a little bit confusing.
Yeah, we'll explain it. So here, this is from Elizabeth Brannan's laboratory, and what we're going to see is this little baby, is going to be focused attention on the middle of the screen by that star. Then they're going to show the baby two different quantities changing all the time. They change in the arrangement, the size of the rectangle they cover, the size of the dots, but only one of them changes the number of the dots. What they're interested in is, where does the baby look? Does the baby look at the one that's changing number or not? So center on the there we go. You and I can see the one on the left is changing in number, but the one on the right stays the same number, but everything else is changing. Look at the baby's eyes. Definitely seems to be more interested in the one on the left. However, he's going to check the other one pretty soon, very quickly. You'll see. His eyes will flash over and he'll say, are you interesting? Nope. No, he finds that's not interesting. In fact, he finds this really interesting. I mean, I love this changing number. Yeah, he's excited about it. And he'll check again. Is the other side just as good as that side? Check it out. He'll look the other way. I'll give you a chance. You are boring. And here he goes and watches the other side. This is the approximate number system. He doesn't know the numbers. He doesn't know number names. He's sensitive to changes in quantity. And that means we have, you always say, learning trajectories is an asset-based approach. You made that point before. You always build on what kids know and can do.
So when we talked with teachers who get frustrated sometimes and say the children they come with no skills. In fact, we know from this research that we come with a sensitivity to number, and we can use that and build on it. So the next, how do we build on it, is this recognition of number. Now, a key thing in recognition of number is that you're still recognizing quantity and you're not counting, but it's really not instantly. It's the kind of thing, if we want to go on. Oh, and then we move to perceptual subitizing, where it is instantly. But if we go to the Learning Trajectories website, we'll start with, I believe,
here we're just showing the website. I wasn't sure whether the website had come through to Turkey adequately, so I just made some static screenshots here to show you that once you click on Explore LTs, you might pick a year. The typical levels for a kid at 4 years of age are shown in highlighting, but all of the levels are there. So that's kind of where we're pulling these videos from and the like. So let's do some, wow, I didn't warn him. Let's do some perceptual subitizing. I'm not sure how fast this is getting through the internet, but I hope you could see those. And probably you could see, yes, there were 4. And I didn't give you time to count them. So, even though I showed you twice. But that's what it's all about. But there's 2 types of subitizing. That's perceptual. We have actually built in neurological patterns that are sensitive to different numbers. And we learn to see that very quickly and tie it to a number label, right? But moving on to conceptual subitizing then is like this. There you go. Don't know if I gave you enough on that one. I'll do it one, I'll show it now. Most of you could see 8. But if they did experiments on us, which they have done on adults, not us personally, which they have done on adults, they know that your brains don't read 8. They read 5 and 3 and put it together into 8 within a few tenths of a second. So it feels to us like we saw 8, but actually we saw the 2 different amounts.
So we talked about the goal, and we talked about the big steps. But if we want to think about learning trajectories again, to really understand it, we have to think about...
and to help kids learn it.
To help kids learn all 3 parts. So if we think about a learning trajectory as a garden path, we have a goal, which to get through to the gate at the end of the garden. And we have levels of development, which are like stepping stones along that path to get us there. And what we also have to have is the kind of things we do to help children go from one stepping stone to the next stepping stone to the next stepping stone. So at the very, very earliest level, we have those foundations. We're going to build on what children come to us with this sort of sensitivity to number. And the next level, the next stone along the path, is small collection namer. That's where children are able to name the set, but they're not counting. And in fact, we don't even need them to count. But I think it's always confusing for teachers and parents and caregivers when a child will look at a set and say, oh, there are 2 doggies. Look at 2 dogs, 2 doggies. But if you...
The parent will often say, yes, 1, 2. But that's not how the kid knew there were 2 dogs.
Right, and if they ask the child to count, they get nonsense sometimes.
Yeah.
Because that we're building on that internal sensitivity to quantity, and that I recognize 2. I'm not counting 2, I'm recognizing 2, and I'm able to name that collection.
But at this level, the child needs the perceptual support of seeing it.
Yes.
You can't flash it to them. It's too fast.
No. And if usually they're very young, but if you could say imagine 2, they probably aren't able to do that as well. However, go to the next. Maker of small collections is very similar in that they're able to hold up 2 fingers, or give you 2, or give me 3 even. But again, they're not counting. They just know. They're able to make a small collection.
That looks right.
Right. They know, okay, this is 3. So I think we have a video to show that. Yes. Excellent. I love when things work.
Okay. Can you show me a different way with your fingers? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah? Yeah? Okay, thank you.
So,
cutie.
Yeah, this little guy was able to make a set of 3 with his fingers in all different ways. He knew all different ways to do 3, but he couldn't count 3. He knew what 3 looked like, and was able to make that collection.
The fact that he could make it in different ways nails it. He was not just taught, how old are you? Put up these fingers, and,
or more
and he
typically
memorized
these,
it, or
right.
more typically those. Okay,
right.
He knew how to change it as long as it looked right.
Exactly. But it's not instantaneous. It can be up there as long as you want. So that's a big difference between our next level, where we really are able to look at a set of objects for just a couple seconds and be able to tell what that quantity is. So the next big jump, the next big stepping stone is perceptual subitizer. And usually kids can do it about up to their age. So
about right. And now with good experiences, they can go beyond.
We get 4-year-olds doing conceptual subitizing.
Up to 10.
So we know we can go way farther.
Yeah.
But without any instruction, typically they start off and they're perceptual subitizers to 4 when they're about 4 years old.
5 is another leap.
5 is another leap. And in fact, some kids can see 5, but then that next big stepping stone is okay, perceptual subitizing to 5. Let's do that.
Just make a guess. How many frogs do you think I have here in my set? 5.
That's all.
She didn't count.
How would you know?
Without counting.
She didn't count. It was very, very quick. It was very quick. It wasn't that instantaneous kind of thing that we took them away, but we know because it was so fast that she indeed was subitizing.
Yeah, I think I'm going to skip this one because it's the same level, and you wanted to get up to that.
Yeah, and the next is conceptual subitizing. So the same quantity, but like Doug said before, kids are seeing it as 2 different quantities and instantaneously putting those 2 quantities together. They don't think, I saw 3, I saw 2, and then add it and see 5. They see 5. But if we ask them, what did you see? they really sometimes will say, I saw a 4 and a 1, or I saw a 3 and a 2. And that's what really separates conceptual subitizing from perceptual subitizing.
Perceptual, you don't have a way to talk about what you saw except to say the amount. I saw 3. But in conceptual, you can see 5 and then talk about parts.
Exactly.
That makes it so important for later addition and subtraction, right? What's next? I actually skipped a couple levels and jumped up to 10 just for the slide.
Yeah, there's different levels of conceptual subitizing. So once children conceptually subitize 5, the next thing is just to go up to higher and higher numbers. And once they have 10, we can use that knowledge of 10 to really build bigger numbers. Let's watch this little girl.
I'd like you to tell me how many grapes are on this card. Remember the grapes? Ready? Just for a quick moment. How many grapes?
10.
Good girl.
I wasn't even counting because I knew it was
Halfway done.
2 5
More
makes
than.
10.
That's right. Well, you've learned a lot, haven't you? Now I'm going to show you a card with some pennies on it. Try to tell me how many pennies are on this card when I show them to you, just for a quick moment. Ready?
He says 30 more minutes.
15.
So it's a full hour.
I'm like the smartest kid in my class.
I hope you could hear her at the end say, I'm like the smartest kid in my class. And she is very well, doing very well in mathematics. So what level was that, and what was with the fingers there?
So we know that she's a really good, this is a very good video to show conceptual subitizing and not conceptual subitizing. So she's able to conceptually subitize the 10, and she sees the 5, but then she has to combine the 2 by arithmetic, by counting on. So we wouldn't say
it
that...
It also shows subitizing plus counting there.
Exactly.
As combined forces.
And a counting strategy to solve a problem.
That's right.
But we wouldn't say that she conceptually subitized 15. She was able to instantaneously see the 10, instantaneously see the 5, but the 15 had to come from the work after. So she's able to conceptually subitize to 10. We don't actually know, was she able to conceptually subitize all the ways to see 7 or 8 or 9? But on this video, just going on this one video, we know that she was able to conceptually subitize 10 in that one arrangement. Now, if we were teaching her, we would give her lots and lots of different examples to really understand what she could do. But this is just an example of an assessment, an interview.
These are assessments.
Yeah, they're interviews.
They're interviews to see what they know. They're not
and so we
teaching episodes.
We just take these one little videos to be able to show what the behavior looks like. Oh. So now we're going to the teaching practices, that really important part of the third part of a learning trajectory. And what teachers do, it has to be connected to the level of the developmental progression. They're designed to promote thinking at that level. And we really try to think, what are kids thinking mentally at that level, and how do we build on that? Next. And we include all kinds of settings, interactions, teaching strategies, so kids can be in centers, conversations, questions, but they can just be playing. But we really mean that they're active learning experiences. There's no perfect worksheet that's going to work, especially because we know that when teachers are working with kids, kids can change levels pretty quickly, and being able to adapt a worksheet can be really difficult.
But being able to adapt when you're playing fun games, what's that one on the left there?
So on the one on the left is a game we called Snapshots for a long time, and teachers have really taken it to new levels and found all different ways to do it. But in this particular example, this child, there's some counters that are hidden underneath that paper plate. And the child has cards in front of him that he can point to tell how many.
Because she's moving on to numeral recognition as well. You don't
Right.
have to. You can have them say the word or hold up fingers.
Right, but she's trying to do two goals. Wait, go back.
Oh, sorry.
Goals at once. So what she's going to do is take the plate off for just 2 seconds, put the plate back on, and then he can point to how many there are under there. And it's a game for him. It's a fun game for him. But if he's struggling, if he can't do 4, for example, she can quickly take 1 away and see if he can do 3. And if he can do 3, do different arrangements of 3. And she can make it unique to him. And if he can do 5 really well, she can quickly change it and put 6 on and just give him more cards to try from. So it helps the teacher be in charge of the situation based on the child's development. And the bottom is just a computer game, but we did have a computer game that did the same thing. It showed a quantity for a brief amount of time.
Actually,
and there's
there
a new
is a computer game on LT Squared,
Right.
our Learning and Teaching with Learning Trajectories website Julie's talking about. It's called Subitize Planets. And it goes through all the levels. So it's free, and people can do that. Not yet in Turkish, but if they know the English words at least. But there's 2 other activities. I love Foxy 4 and Tricky 2. Those you cover a number of things with a bowl, for instance, and then you move them around, and kids have to try to find the 4 or the 2 or whatever the goal is, right. For that individual child. So those are all on that learningtrajectories.org website. And it's not moving. There we go.
So what do we do to help children learn to subitize? We showed an example of some activities that are fun.
Yeah, another important thing to do is to use small numbers in everyday talk. Our friend Minna Hanula, right, did her whole dissertation on this and found that it was really important just to use with the very youngest kids, 1 to 3 years of age, right? To very important to just use small number words when you describe things in everyday settings. How many snacks somebody has, how many doors you can open or something. We already talked about subitizing.
So those are some tips for what to do. And I also think that for subitizing, he went pretty quickly over. Is we've worked with teachers, and most of the teachers that we work with have found that doing subitizing lots and lots of times throughout the day for short periods of time is really helpful. So that's one of those activities we can do when all the kids are together, when we're waiting for them to calm down. We can pull out, our teachers use cards or paper plates with dots on them, and they pick up a dot and show it and put it down. And
pick up a plate with a number of dots
and then quickly put it down, and kids all start focusing, and it gets them to settle down and start paying attention to the teacher.
2 for the price of 1.
Right, but we also know that we've learned through research from ourselves and other people what not to do. And one of the big things not to do is to always use the same arrangement of objects.
So this person, Kathy Richardson, wrote a chapter for a book Julie and I edited, and she said she taught the kids this arrangement, and they knew 5, and she thought they really understood 5. And then she said, I'm going to have them make 5. So she gave them counters, and she was a little distressed that this is what many of the kids made. So they were seeing a square or an X, but they weren't seeing 5. So one thing don't use the same arrangement for every time you show them 5, right, or 4 or any other number, right? Also, don't ignore it. Bob Wright in Australia found that when teachers didn't understand subitizing, the kids would be playing a dice game and they might roll a 4, and they just say 4. And if the teacher's nearby, she would tell them, no, you don't know that, count them. And she would not celebrate their subitizing, but instead replaced it by forcing them to count.
Right.
It's not their fault. They didn't know about subitizing. We're the ones that train teachers. Right, we didn't teach them very well. So we're hoping to share that with you. It's really important. Skip this or no?
No. Another thing is always we're asking teachers when we're trying to figure out what kids understand is to ask, how do you know? And have kids talk about their strategies. But in subitizing, it actually slows them down. So when they're doing perceptual subitizing and you're doing 2 seconds, it's how many? And if they get it, great, move on, do higher numbers.
Because there's nothing they can say. We're not expecting them to say, I'm neurologically tuned to be able to recognize 2, and I tied that to a number word. There's no good explanation. In fact, it might do what we just said. If you say, how did you know when they subitize 4? The kid either is going to say, I just knew it, or count them. We don't want them to tell us they counted when they didn't count.
Right.
But
when we get to conceptual subitizing, then asking children, how do you know, or to tell you they're thinking is helpful, because you'll hear how they can see the 2 quantities. And again, they have to give the total first. So what did you see? I saw 8. How did you do that? I saw 5 and 3. In this case, I saw 5. I saw 4 and 1, or 2, 1 and 2. All the different ways, and we can talk about that as a group. We haven't enough time. We'll go through fast.
okay.
Another example of a learning trajectory that we want to talk about really quickly, and we will talk fast through this.
Somebody said like peekaboo.
Yes,
before.
just like peekaboo.
Good one. Good one.
And is composing and decomposing geometric shapes. Doug talks very fast to this one, but he does it very well. And we can show some videos and show how something as simple as children putting together shapes, which teachers have been doing forever, but not really thinking about kids' development, can be thought of in a learning trajectories way, in which case kids aren't going to end up thinking like, I'm good at puzzles or I'm not good at puzzles, or I'm good at shapes or not good at shapes. That all children can develop and get very good at something which we know, in fact, is going to help them arithmetically.
There is research, people by ourselves and others, that shows if you can group the shapes together, like that first example we said of the little boys doing that puzzle, it helps them group individual items into 10s and then 100s and everything else, right?
Right.
It's also true that this kind of composing shapes is essential if you want the kids not to understand the area as length times width. I mean, that's all they understand about area. What's area? Length times width. Well, what do you mean?
Right.
Well, it's length times width. You have to understand to be able to decompose that rectangle into little squares, into rows and columns.
So what does a developmental progression look like?
I'm going to actually turn the volume down on the video because it's just the assessor asking, so I can talk a little bit about this. Here is a child who first solved that puzzle on the lower right, and now is working on a very similar one, and each time doesn't even match the shapes to the objects. You almost want to say she doesn't know anything. Well, that would not be an asset-based approach. What does this little 2.5-year-old know? She knows if she's going to put one shape on one foot, that there's symmetry there. Intuitively, she knows. And she's going to put the same shape on the other foot. So she's got a good start there, but she can't match the shapes. Let's go up 2 levels. Here's a girl, I'm going to explain this because it goes very quickly, who's trying to solve this puzzle in the lower right, and she's going to try to fit that square in where you and I can probably see that only the blue rhombus or diamond or 2 green triangles in the pattern blot set is going to fit. Watch what she does. It's fascinating. She tries to put it in there, but she knocks the other 2 shapes out of the way. And then what happens is she fixes the other 2 shapes, holds them down, and tries to force it in again. But it won't work. So she eventually gives up. And lucky for her, right next to her hand is the shape she needs. But she's at a trial and error level. Not this girl. This is our goal for preschool and or kindergarten kids, 4 or 5 years of age. Watch how she uses in this robot puzzle symmetry very explicitly. She puts one on one side and she flips it for the other side. Not only that, and more important, she does not use trial and error. Watch, she looks at the puzzles. Then watch where her eyes go when she picks a shape up. Are you ready? She picks a shape up and she looks immediately back at the puzzle, not at the shape in her hand. This goes really quickly, but try to see it. Her eyes are on the puzzle when her hand moves the shape into the perfect position and orientation, because she has the ability, she has constructed the ability to build a mental image of the shape, to manipulate those shapes, and to be able to have her mind direct her hand without even looking at her hand. What a powerful tool. I'm going to skip this next one. What a powerful tool for later learning. How does that connect to these, though?
So again, the 3 parts. We want children to compose shapes so they can understand math all the way up. We have the developmental levels. And once we have the developmental levels, how does a teacher use that knowledge? The kind of puzzles that we give children every day need to be available to them based on their level. If it's only free explore, kids won't move through the levels. So for a child at a lower level, we have a puzzle like this where they can simply match shapes.
Like that first girl. She can
Right.
just match the shapes, but she still sees how it's being composed, right?
Right. As opposed to a higher level where if it's harder to see what happens, but you can kind of see where to put one shape. And once you put one shape, that gives you a big clue over to where to put another shape. And then finally, the kids at that highest level will get something like this where it's pretty difficult. And it can be difficult for adults even
There's
who
big
have...
amorphous areas,
Right.
and you really got to look at those angles.
And some people usually ask, is it like tangram shapes as well, or tangram puzzles? And yes, tangram puzzles are the same type of thing, where there are easy ones where maybe the lines are in, and then harder ones, etc. But we know that it's this experiential, that if we give kids experience at their level, and that's key, and keep moving them through their levels, that they can get there, that all of us can get very good at this kind of spatial thinking, which is so important for math.
Make sure I don't misconstrue that this is a wonderful thing. This is a commercial set of materials. Actually, I was handed when I first taught kindergarten myself. And I thought, this is great. They're learning shape composition. No, they're not. They're learning how to match the shapes. The entire kit, all the puzzles in it, page after page of these puzzles, were at one level. Would they have helped that first little girl? Yeah, maybe, but my kids were 4 and 5 years of age. They were way past this level. So you've got to be careful of commercial materials that don't understand kids' development of these things.
Exactly.
And you've got to have puzzles that are a different level, and it makes a difference to kids, does it not?
Exactly. When we did this kind of approach with teachers, we're great with time. With teachers, we both, there were 3 groups of teachers. One group of teachers was taught this learning trajectories approach, that's called building blocks. The second group of teachers was taught with more or less what we would do typically in classrooms, where first we did counting activities.
Then we
for a
no
few
more
weeks.
counting. Now
then
we're
we
going
did
to
shapes for a little bit. Then we did patterning. Then maybe we went back and did counting
and
again.
they mostly taught to target.
Exactly. They modeled how to do something. Children did it like they did it, and then they moved on the whole class to the next activity. And the teachers, and they had a lot of professional development. But the teachers who were taught about how kids think and how to change the instruction based on their level of development, those children scored way higher. Next. When we did this with many, many classrooms and many teachers, many kids, we actually, over 1,000 children, we saw really good results. So the control group was in the blue, and the teachers who were taught building blocks and the learning trajectories approach with professional development did better. An interesting little side effect. The teachers were a little worried because in the U.S., literacy and language is such a huge focus. Kids have to learn to read eventually, so they have to know their letters, they have to know their sounds. And the idea that we would spend time on math made teachers nervous. They felt they were maybe not going to know their letters, and then what's going to happen?
And how about their language abilities?
And how about their language abilities when they're doing so much math? So we went 3 months after the school year ended, the following fall, and we interviewed children. We told them a story of a naughty bus, a bus who ran away. And the children had to tell us the story back. And we also asked them all their letters very quickly. What letter is this? What letter is this? And what we found is that children who were in these classrooms where their math instruction and their math ability had gone way better, did fine on their letters. There was no difference in their letters. And in fact, they did way better on language. They were able to give more information when they told the story back. Their sentences were more complex. They didn't need much prompts. They were able to do it independently. And afterwards, these questions of inferential questions, why do you think he did that, and things, they scored higher on. So we know that teaching math in this way, where we're asking kids, how do you know, and really watching how they're developing, in fact, help their language skills as well.
Because they have to dig down to talk about, how did I figure that out?
Exactly. So we don't lose. We don't lose on literacy, and early childhood teachers can feel that they're meeting the needs of the children.
We're doing fine.
Because if you only focus on literacy, you're not focusing on the whole child, because math is an important part of children. So again, one of the things that happens with teachers with whom we work is we work very hard in their classrooms, and then lots of times when we go away and we stop working with teachers, they kind of go back to the way they were teaching because it was like a fun project, but I'll go back to what I did. But in the groups of teachers, in the classrooms with whom we worked, the teachers with whom we worked, what happened is when we looked out, the teachers were doing better. And in fact, when we looked at their children years later, the children maintained those effects while they were given, those teachers were given additional instruction where they knew to capitalize.
So we worked, the kindergarten and first grade teachers in the red line kept working with learning trajectories.
Right.
The light blue line, they got a good experience in preschool, but then kindergarten and first grade just kept going back with
and the
what
teachers,
they did.
The teachers didn't
and
build
they
on
lost a lot of the effect, right?
And you can go on. And again, the teachers did better over time, because once you understand how children think, you can't go backwards. You can't unlearn that. You're always going to ask children, how many are there? Or how did you figure that out? And so teachers are actually able to teach better long into the future. So the time spent learning trajectories is time well spent, because it's lasting.
Not just for this year, not for the next year, but the entire time.
Right. So when you affect a teacher by understanding learning trajectories, you're affecting all the children that they're going to teach from now far into the future.
So this is just one measure that Julie came up with, and what we did here is, in that giant study of 1,300 kids, we looked at the quality and quantity of the math that was happening in the classroom, and in fall they did pretty well. They didn't do better on small groups than general curriculum. There's just fewer items on the test for general curriculum than small group, okay? But then in the spring, when we were still working with them, they did a little better. Then what we did is we went right back to those teachers 2 years after we had finished with them. No more professional development. We didn't get to work with them. The funding was gone, and they did better.
Yep.
They didn't fall off like you find in the literature. They did better. And 6 years out, they did better still. So I won't talk about this. We're doing a research project looking at LT squared, right?
Right.
And we are done just about in time for questions.
And we have some questions. So let's go in the chat first. One is the Tangrams, which you show. Children look paper and after they complete the shape with Tangrams.
Now, my question is about the Tangrams, which you show. Children look at the paper and after they complete the shape.
Oh, no, they do is what they're just puzzles on paper, and the children have the shapes, and they can put the shapes on to fill the form on the paper. So they're more like puzzles than looking at a model and making it on their own. They actually make it on the paper. The next question is, how do the two differentiate trajectories from progressions? For us, learning progressions are important. They're the middle part of the learning trajectory.
Oh, that's so important, though. We didn't talk about that. So say it again, because some people use the phrase learning progressions to mean what we mean by developmental progressions, and some people use it to mean the whole learning trajectories idea. It's a little confusing.
So for us, learning trajectories have 3 goals. So the progression...
3 parts.
3 parts. The progression, the goal, and all the stuff you do to help kids get through the progression. And that's why we call them learning trajectories. And it's very important that includes all three. We also have a hand up. You can unmute yourself. Nezakat. I don't have the thing. We have one hand up, so I don't know how to call on that person.
Nezaket, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Nezakat, yeah.
I think she's not hearing us.
Sure, that's okay. I wish we knew, but she did ask a question earlier, Julie, that I think I'll try to scroll to. But in the meantime, would you emphasize that I said it was not only okay, but our usual practice to first teach these with the whole class and then small groups?
Sure.
So that was one question.
So sometimes, we always say that the best mode of instruction is all modes of instruction. Whole group, small group, and centers. Small groups are nice because it allows you to work with 4 children about at one time and really modify activities. But we like to introduce activities in whole group, especially so that children can work independently in centers and know what's happening in small group. So we get them excited about coming and working in small groups. So that's important.
We had a question here that I didn't understand. Is this related to one-to-one correspondence? Unfortunately, I read it long after she wrote it, so I don't know what she means by
But subitizing. I'm sure it's
subitizing. Okay. Talk about that. One-to-one correspondence is a very different process than subitizing.
Right. And you can keep going. So, sure. So I think with subitizing, the idea is that it's more tied to cardinality. So with one-to-one correspondence, it's able to keep, when children are counting a point or a nod, with a number word. But very often children are able to do that, and if you cover it and say, so how many, they can't tell you how many there really are. But when children are able to subitize, they're able to know how many there are, even if they don't have cardinality. And so the subitizing...
By cardinality, you mean the cardinal principle in counting, that the last number word tells how many,
yes,
right?
Yes, they're able to know that the last number word tells how many because they're able to subitize that quantity. So for children who are struggling to count, having them count a smaller set that they can look at and know how many helps them understand that concept of cardinal count concept, which I don't understand why we have to go into it. And then so subitizing and counting really mesh, so they do help each other.
And mostly people are saying, thank you, you are so welcome. We work with many educators in Turkey.
Yes, we do.
We had several Turkish professors come over and stay with us.
Two people are coming next year.
Next year to work with us. So we'll keep up with that.
The question about Tangrams, not subitizing. One-to-one correspondence.
One-to-one correspondence.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know if they're related in terms of geometric correspondence and counting correspondence.
We say there are 2 types of correspondence. We call what you're talking about object correspondence.
Yes.
And you'll find it in the number comparison strand, because if kids can match one object to another in 2 sets, they can see if they're the same number.
Right.
It's important, but it's not the correspondence. Julie, we have time. Talk about how the correspondence in counting is actually more difficult because it has 2 parts to it.
Well, 3 parts, right? Because you're corresponding in a word in a number sequence to an object with emotion.
Yeah, I meant 2 correspondences.
Right, so you have to correspond a motion to an object and the right number word to that motion. So it's a 1-to-1-to-1 correspondence.
Another question, Julie. Where is the home math environment in SALT? Is it the developmental progression or teaching practices?
It would be the teaching practices. It would be the teaching practices.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to share this real quickly, and I'm probably going to mess this up. And you can tell us that we have to quit anytime you want to. Do you see Safari? Real quick, honey. Where's Safari?
Safari Learning Trajectories.
There it is. Okay. Got it. Okay, here is the website. It's, again, if you can read this, it's learningtrajectories.org. One word, compound word, learningtrajectories.org. And then I would like to show you that, first of all, if parents just go to the teaching practices, they can indeed do these kind of fun activities. And when you click on it, everybody, you can either start the electronic game, or you can go here and actually download materials and a full example of what, the PDF has everything in it, right? How you teach that activity. But I wanted to show you something else, which is why I went to the website, that parents don't just have to go to activities. There's a whole section in the resources just for families. There's a video that tells you about what's there, and then you click the just for families, and there are so many resources here for you. How to do them, online games, lots of featured articles about early math. And they might be interesting to teachers too, but teachers have their own place. And if you train teachers, work in a professional learning community or the like, you might also like the professional development down here.
Right.
And
we're constantly updating those resources. So in fact, there's guides to help for professional development leaders to use with teachers that right now are being completely updated. So those will be back on pretty quickly.
Actually, they've never gone on, and they'll be up once we get them. There's support for distance learning as well. If any of you are teaching virtually or in a hybrid or combined situation, please check out these. Any more? I can't see the chat anymore, Julie, so let's see if I can get that back. Every time you change in Zoom. I'm going to stop share so I can quickly get back to the chat. Oh, look what we got here.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, wait, we never gave him credit for
putting Turkish kids on the website.
Oh my gosh, Turkish kids are on the website. Turkish kids are especially in the spatial thinking kind of thing, thanks to our Turkish friend. I didn't even know you were on here, and we didn't give you credit here, so maybe I can I can just really get there real quick while you finish up, Julie.
I think that's it, really. I think any more questions? We really are at time. So thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the wonderful questions. And Doug's going to end with...
I was trying to find there we go. Some of the Turkish activities are right here. Oh, I'm not signed in anymore.
So you can't do it.
See it. But Turkish pictures are
Yeah, you do have to sign into the website to see the videos. Thank you all. Thank you for coming.
Thank you too. Our seminar ended here. We are appreciated to Mr. Clements and Mrs. Julie Sarama because of their speech, and the participants, since you spared your valuable time with us. In addition, we planted a tree in behalf of Mr. Clements and Mrs. Julie Sarama at the Tema Foundation. We hope that we can be with you again in the future events too.
I hope so.
Bye-bye.
Lastly, we have a poll about the seminar. If you can fill the poll, then we can finish.